What is the state of play this hour?
Well, the House is wrapping up their last votes. Ironically, the final vote they'll take before they leave is on the USMCA, the trade deal that Donald Trump so much wanted to see get passed this year. The Democrats have reworked. They will leave Washington, D.C. without selecting their managers for the impeachment case in the Senate. That is a necessary step before the articles of impeachment can be transferred to the Senate. And while it is possible that they could do something by unanimous consent in a pro forma session to some, procedural efforts over the holiday break, what this tells us is something we sort of already knew, that the House is not going to push the case into the Senate until the new year. Speaker Pelosi said today she wants the time to see exactly what the Senate agrees to. It'll help inform her decision as to how many managers she wants. Who does she pick? Perhaps some members might be better at grilling witnesses. Others might be better at making their case directly to the Senate. We are still waiting on some kind of affirmative confirmation that Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer have sat down to start having this conversation about how they will start the Senate trial process. If it looks like the Clinton impeachment, we'll see a two-stage process wherein both sides, the impeachment managers and the White House, will present their case, and then there would be a vote on witnesses, and if so, how many. What's not clear right now from where I stand is whether that'll be good enough for Democrats, whether an agreement to vote on witnesses later will be good enough, or whether they'll try to play hardball here and force an agreement on witnesses up front. All of this is a moving target, though, because there is the smell of jet fumes in the air as both chambers are trying to finish all of their legislative work today and go home for the rest of the year.
Garrett, let me ask you about this question that hangs over this next step of the process, and that's the question of witnesses, because it would seem that the remedy for the Republicans' complaint that the case is thin or lacks firsthand witnesses is the same thing the Democrats want. It would seem in a normal time in a town other than Washington, D.C., a compromise would be within reach.
You would think that, and you could be wrong. Look, in this case, this is both sides accusing each other of bad faith negotiating here. Democrats are saying, look, Mitch McConnell went out on TV and said he's not going to be an impartial juror. Why should we trust his process? And Republicans are saying, at least we admit it. Democrats have multiple senators who are running for president. Do you think they'll be impartial? Of course not. This is politics. And so they're going back and forth on this. I mean, there's almost no effort to not be hypocritical either to the last impeachment, the Clinton impeachment, when the shoe was on the other political foot, or to what you said the week before. I mean, I think the more likely compromise perhaps might be that there's an open process on witnesses being called, that you might see some Democratic witnesses with a motion that gets enough votes to call a witness, but then you might see Republicans pursuing some witnesses of their own. And it's possible that even the mutually assured destruction of who Republicans might call could get Democrats to back off a little bit. So look, there is a lot of negotiation that will go into just getting this thing off the ground, and then the subsequent steps as it starts moving, whether that's the first week of January when both houses come back or sometime after that. And I'll just leave you with this other thought. The other X factor, all those Democratic senators I mentioned who are running for president, they probably don't want to be left wondering in late or early January or, God forbid, February, when or if they might get called back for a Senate impeachment trial. They're going to want some surety on this, too. So there's a lot of moving parts here.
Garrett, stick around for the rest of this conversation, if you will. Andrew, how do you explain to people outside of sort of the really difficult to understand and kind of opaque intricacies of an impeachment process, which is different from a legal process, why both sides wouldn't want to hear from firsthand witnesses of the conduct in question?
So you would think that if you're seeking the truth, you would want to have as many witnesses and documents as possible. And so when you have Mitch McConnell saying there's a paucity of evidence, that obviously is playing right into the hands of the Democrats to say, fine, then bring on some witnesses and documents. The truth of the matter is that Democrats have built a very strong case. And the last thing in the world that the Republicans would want was to see, any of these people, Bolton, anybody having to take the stand, because they're going to be really not great witnesses for the president. I mean, otherwise you would have seen them in the House.
And Bolton's already appeared record in terms of the sworn testimony of other people, and that
Right.
testimony includes his deputy Fiona Hill, who said he sent her to the White House counsel's office so that they got on the record, their office. They're inseparable in terms of sort of a chain of command. Fiona Hill's reported directly to Bolton. We also have testimony, sworn testimony, that John Bolton called it a drug deal. You have to assume, as a prosecutor, right, that if any of that was wrong, we would have heard from a lawyer for John Bolton?
Well, absolutely. But you also, you can be pretty sure the White House would not have been saying we're not turning over documents, we're not turning over witnesses if they thought the documents and witnesses would be good for them.
Right.
I mean, that's not what you do. I just wanted to mention there's another X factor here, which is that there is going to be a judge. There is going to be Chief Justice Roberts who is going to preside over this. And it is a very interesting role because it's not like a judge in a normal case. Now, the Democrats get to make a motion to the judge saying, you know, we'd like to call witnesses and we'd like a subpoena. And the rules are, under Rule 7 of the Senate rules, the justice can, but is not required to rule on that. So Justice Roberts could decide to go forward. If he does, that can be overruled by a simple majority.
Well, is there any sort of deference to him because of his role? I mean, a lot of these Republican senators voted for his confirmation as Chief Justice. What's the dynamic?
So to me, that's when you look at the actual rules on paper, you sit there and say, well, look, the majority can always overrule him. But it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
In other words, if Justice Roberts were to say, look, I'm inclined to grant this is relevant evidence, and so I'm going to do it, that puts a lot more pressure on some of the senators, at least, to say, are we really going to overrule that? Now, the big question here is whether Chief Justice Roberts is actually going to want to play that role, because under the rules, he doesn't have to. He could say, you know what? I'm not going to rule on that. Unlike a normal judge, I'm going to let it go to the Senate.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, he seems, if you're examining his conduct in the last, just even since Trump, I mean, he does seem to have an eye toward history. He does seem to balance his role.
I agree. And as the Chief Justice, he is certainly more concerned, I think, than any other justice in terms of the institutional integrity of the Supreme Court.
Right.
But this is a different role.
Right.
This really isn't about the institutional integrity of the Supreme Court. This is about presiding in a unique way over a Senate trial. And because the rules say that he's not quite like a normal judge, the judge doesn't get to rule and then the parties can overrule him. The judge is the last word. So it's a very unusual position. But I still think the Democrats have a play there, which is that if the Democrats want to force a vote, they can make a motion to the Chief Justice, and then the real issue is either the Chief Justice will rule on it or the Republican senators are going to have to say, no, we are against having more witnesses. And I think that's pretty unappetizing.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.